You're 19 years old. You've never killed anything bigger than a rabbit. Now you're crouched in a muddy hole in France, and there's a German soldier crawling toward you through the dark. He's close enough that you can hear him breathing, close enough to smell the sauerkraut on his breath, close enough to see that he's just as terrified as you are. Your rifle? Useless. Too long for this coffin-sized trench. Your bayonet? Stuck in the mud wall behind you. So you grab the one thing that works, a sharpened shovel, and you do what no training manual ever prepared you for. You split his skull open like a watermelon. His blood sprays across your face. His last word sounds like, "Mama." You just killed a human being with a garden tool, and you've got 3 more hours until sunrise. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was 1914, the age of machine guns and poison gas and artillery that could vaporize a man from 3 miles away. The most technologically advanced armies in human history were supposed to fight a clean, modern war. Instead, they spent 4 years beating each other to death with medieval weapons in ditches barely wide enough to bury a coffin. Here's what they don't teach you in history class. World War I didn't just kill 10 million men. It broke something fundamental about human civilization. It took shop clerks and farm boys and turned them into Stone Age killers. Then it sent them home and expected them to forget what they'd learned about themselves. Most of them never did. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the deadliest weapons ever created became worthless junk, why soldiers threw away their rifles and picked up sharpened sticks, and what happens to a man's soul when he discovers he's capable of caving in another human being's skull with his bare hands. This is the story they tried to bury, the part of the war that was too brutal, too personal, too medieval for the history books. But it happened, every single day, for 4 years, and the men who lived through it, they never came home. Not really, because once you've killed a man close enough to taste his blood, once you've looked into his dying eyes and seen your own reflection staring back, you can never unsee it. Welcome to the war that turned modern soldiers into medieval executioners. Welcome to the trenches where civilization went to die. Every general had the same plan. Punch hard, move fast, win quick. The Germans would sweep through Belgium like a scythe. The French would charge with bayonets fixed. The British would arrive just in time to mop up. Christmas dinner at home, victory parades, medals all around. Instead, they built the longest grave in human history. When the German war machine ground to a halt at the Marne River, something unprecedented happened. 2 million men looked at each other across a few hundred yards of open ground and realized the same thing. Whoever moves first, dies first. So they dug. Just for a few days, they told themselves. Just until we figure out the next move. 4 years later, those temporary holes had become a 400-mile scar across Europe, from the beaches of Belgium to the mountains of Switzerland. Not trenches, underground cities, complete with kitchens, hospitals, command bunkers, and sleeping quarters carved into solid chalk. But here's the part that broke every military manual ever written. The frontline trenches were 7 feet deep and 4 feet wide, just wide enough for a man to stand, just narrow enough to trap him. Your rifle, the Lee Enfield that made the British Empire, was 4 feet long with the bayonet, in a 4-foot-wide trench. Try to swing that weapon around a corner and you'll smash it against the wall. Try to thrust with the bayonet and you'll hit dirt before you hit flesh. The machine gun that dominated no man's land, completely useless when the enemy is close enough to spit on. These trenches weren't just defensive positions, they were death mazes. Zigzag communication trenches led to fire bays that connected to traverses that opened into dugouts that went down, down, down into the earth. You could get lost in your own trench system. You could turn a corner and walk straight into an enemy patrol, and when that happened, When you found yourself face to face with a man trying to kill you in a space barely wider than a coffin, all that modern technology became worthless junk. That's when soldiers remembered something their ancestors knew. Sometimes the oldest ways are the only ways. Meet Private Tommy Atkins, British Expeditionary Force. 6 months ago, he was a shopkeeper in Manchester. Now he's standing in a French ditch, holding a piece of sharpened steel that used to be a shovel, waiting for the order to kill a man with his bare hands. This is his toolkit for murder: a Webley revolver. 6 shots of 455 caliber death. Each bullet big enough to punch a hole through a man's chest you could put your fist through. But 6 shots only. Miss twice, and you're dead. An entrenching tool. Standard issue for every soldier, supposed to be for digging. Tommy's spent 3 hours sharpening the edge until it could shave hair. 1 swing can split a skull like a melon. 2 swings can nearly sever a head. A trench club carved from the leg of a kitchen chair he found in a bombed-out farmhouse. 18 inches long, heavy as a hammer, with 6-inch nails driven through the business end. Tommy calls it the Peacemaker. A fighting knife, 7 inches of Sheffield steel with a brass knuckle guard, cost him 2 weeks' pay from a cutler in Birmingham. The blade is triangular, designed to create wounds that can't be stitched closed. The theory is simple: a wounded enemy is better than a dead one, because wounded men scream, and screaming breaks morale. This isn't a soldier's kit anymore. This is a medieval executioner's toolbox. But here's what the training manuals didn't prepare Tommy for. When you kill a man with a rifle from 200 yards away, he's just a target that falls down. When you kill him with a sharpened shovel, when you're close enough to smell his last meal on his breath, when his blood spatters across your face, he stops being the enemy. He becomes a human being, and so do you. Private Hans Meller, 117th Reserve Infantry Regiment, is having the same realization on the other side of the wire. 6 months ago, he was studying theology in Munich. Now he's carrying 8 stick grenades and a saw-back bayonet, preparing to do things that would make his medieval ancestors proud and his God weep. The transformation is complete. Modern soldiers have become ancient warriors. The only difference is the uniforms. 2:47 a.m. March 15th, 1916, somewhere near Verdun. Lieutenant James Morrison checks his watch and whispers the words that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Fix bayonets. We're going over. But this isn't a charge across no man's land. This is something worse. This is a trench raid. Organized, premeditated murder in the dark. For 3 weeks, Morrison's men have been studying photographs of the German trench system 400 yards away. They've built exact replicas behind their own lines and practiced the attack until they could do it blindfolded. They know where Hans Müller sleeps. They know which dugout contains the machine gun. They know exactly how many men they're going to kill and exactly how they're going to kill them. Morrison's raiders move like ghosts across no man's land. Faces blackened with burnt cork, boots wrapped in cloth to muffle footsteps. Some have removed their boots entirely, preferring to feel their way through the mud with bare feet rather than risk a single sound. The German wire looms ahead, 50 yards of steel thorns designed to channel attackers into machine gun kill zones. Corporal Davies, the unit's wire-cutting specialist, begins his work. Each snip of the cutters sounds like a gunshot in the silence. One wrong move, one piece of wire that snaps back and rings against a metal post, and flares will light up the sky, and machine guns will turn them all into hamburger. Davies cuts the final strand. The raiders slip through the gap like deadly shadows. 3:15 a.m. The German sentry never sees them coming. Morrison's club catches him in the temple with a wet crack that sounds like a branch breaking. The sentry drops without a sound, blood pooling in the mud. The killing has begun. Grenades fly into the dugouts, Mills bombs with 4-second fuses that turn underground shelters into concrete coffins. The explosions are muffled by earth and sandbags, but the screams that follow carry clearly in the night air. Morrison drops into the trench and comes face to face with a German soldier stumbling out of a burning dugout. The man is maybe 19 years old, blonde hair singed, uniform smoking. He's trying to bring his rifle up when Morrison's sharpened entrenching tool takes him in the chest. The blade goes in just below the rib cage and punches through to the spine. The German's eyes go wide, not with pain, but with surprise, like he can't believe this is how his story ends. In a muddy ditch in France, killed by a British shopkeeper with a sharpened shovel. Morrison tries to pull the tool free, but it's stuck between ribs. The German is still alive, still looking at him with those surprised blue eyes. Morrison draws his Webley and puts a .455 slug through the boy's forehead from 6 inches away. The back of the German's skull explodes across the trench wall. This is what modern warfare has become. Not the clean death of artillery or machine guns, but intimate murder with medieval weapons. Morrison will remember those blue eyes for the next 50 years. The raid lasts 12 minutes. Morrison's men kill 17 Germans and capture 3 prisoners. They lose 2 men getting back across no man's land, cut down by machine gun fire as flares turn night into day. Mission accomplished, intelligence gathered, enemy morale damaged. But Morrison knows the truth. They haven't won anything. They've just proven that civilized men can become savages when the situation demands it. And that knowledge will eat at his soul until the day he dies. Lieutenant Morrison sits in his dugout 3 hours after the raid, staring at his hands. There's still blood under his fingernails. German blood. From a boy who looked like his younger brother back in Yorkshire. This is what nobody talks about. This is the part they leave out of the war memoirs and the history books. Human beings are not designed to kill other human beings up close. We're wired to see faces, to recognize expressions, to feel empathy. It's what makes us human instead of animals. Military training tries to override that wiring. Bayonet practice on straw dummies, shouting exercises to build aggression, dehumanizing propaganda that turns the enemy into monsters. But when you're 3 feet away from another man, when you can see the fear in his eyes and smell his sweat, when he's crying for his mother in a language you don't understand, all that training crumbles. Morrison killed his first German with a rifle shot at 300 yards. Clean, distant, professional. The man just fell down and didn't get back up. Morrison felt nothing. His second kill was with a bayonet during a trench assault. Messy, personal. The German tried to surrender at the last second, hands up, saying something in German that might have been "please" or "no" or "I have children." Morrison's bayonet went in just below the sternum and angled up toward the heart. The man died looking into Morrison's eyes, his hands gripping the rifle barrel, trying to push the steel out of his chest. Morrison vomited for 20 minutes after that one. By his 10th kill, the blonde boy with the surprised eyes, Morrison felt nothing at all, and that scared him more than the killing itself. This is what the doctors called emotional blunting, the mind's way of protecting itself from unbearable reality. After enough close-quarters killing, soldiers stopped feeling. They could sharpen their entrenching tools while eating breakfast. They could discuss the best angle for a knife thrust between ribs while writing letters home to their sweethearts. They became efficient killers. And efficiency in killing is the most unnatural thing a human being can achieve. But the mind keeps score. What Morrison couldn't feel during the war came flooding back afterward. The faces, the sounds, the smell of blood and cordite and fear sweat. The way that German boy's skull came apart under the impact of a .455 slug. Morrison tried prayer. He tried drinking. He tried forgetting. Nothing worked. The dead visited him every night for the rest of his life. He wasn't alone. Across Europe, hundreds of thousands of men were discovering that they'd crossed a line no human being should cross. They'd learned that civilization is just a thin coat of paint over something much older and darker. Religious men struggled the most. How do you reconcile Christian mercy with the memory of strangling an enemy soldier with your bare hands? How do you take communion when you can still taste another man's blood? Some adapted. They compartmentalized the war, locked it away in a dark corner of their minds, and moved on with their lives. They became shopkeepers and clerks and farmers, and if you didn't know their history, you'd never guess they'd once been medieval killers. Others broke completely. They couldn't hold jobs, couldn't maintain relationships, couldn't sleep without seeing those faces. Suicide rates among combat veterans were astronomical. Alcoholism was epidemic. Domestic violence was common. The men who'd killed face to face were the worst affected. They'd seen something about human nature that most people never see. They'd learned that every civilized man is 3 missed meals away from barbarism, and once you know that about yourself, you can never unknow it. Lieutenant Morrison survived the war. He returned to Yorkshire, married his sweetheart, opened a small shop, and lived what looked like a normal life for another 43 years. But every night, he dreamed of blue eyes and blood-spattered trench walls. Morrison's story isn't unique. It's the story of an entire generation of men who learned that modern technology couldn't eliminate the ancient reality of close-quarters killing. When push came to shove, literally, they fought like their ancestors had fought for thousands of years. And that knowledge changed them forever. Every close-quarters battle technique used by modern special forces traces back to those muddy trenches. Navy SEALs clearing buildings in Iraq, Army Rangers fighting in Afghan caves, British SAS conducting hostage rescues. They all use weapons and tactics developed by men like Morrison, men who learned to kill efficiently in spaces too small for modern weapons. The psychological training is different now. We understand PTSD better. We know how to prepare soldiers for the mental trauma of close-quarters killing. But the fundamental challenge remains the same. How do you train a civilized human being to commit medieval brutality and still remain human afterward? The answer is, you can't. Not completely. Every war since 1918 has proven the same lesson. Give soldiers the most advanced technology in the world, and they'll still end up fighting with knives and clubs and bare hands when circumstances demand it. Vietnam tunnel rats, Stalingrad street fighters, Fallujah house-to-house combat. The weapons change, but the brutal intimacy remains. Because warfare has a way of stripping away everything except the will to survive. And when survival is on the line, humans revert to the oldest, most reliable methods of killing each other. The men who fought in the trenches of World War I rarely talked about the hand-to-hand combat afterward. It was too personal, too brutal, too far removed from the heroic narratives their families wanted to hear. They'd rather discuss artillery barrages and gas attacks, impersonal deaths that didn't require looking into another man's eyes as you took his life. But their silence doesn't erase what happened. In the most technologically advanced war in human history, millions of men discovered that sometimes a sharpened shovel is more valuable than a machine gun. Sometimes medieval brutality is the only answer to modern problems. Lieutenant Morrison died in 1961, in his sleep, at the age of 72. His last words, according to his wife, were, "I'm sorry," repeated over and over. She never knew what he was apologizing for. But somewhere in France, in a military cemetery with neat white crosses stretching to the horizon, there's a grave marked Hans Müller, age 19, 117th Reserve Infantry Regiment. And if the dead could forgive, maybe they already have. The war ended on November 11th, 1918, at 11 a.m. The guns fell silent. The killing stopped. Millions of men put down their weapons and tried to remember how to be human again. Some succeeded. Others spent the rest of their lives trying. This is the part of history we don't like to examine too closely. The part that reveals what we're all capable of when everything else fails. When technology breaks down and civilization crumbles, and all that's left is the ancient choice, kill or be killed. Maybe that's a lesson worth remembering. Maybe it's a warning worth heeding. Or maybe it's just the truth about human nature that we'd rather not face. But ready or not, it's always there, waiting, just beneath the surface, just 3 feet away, close enough to see the fear in our eyes.